Okay, wonderful. Welcome everybody to this webinar on menu planning with a food database. My name is Caroline Stone. I work at Princeton University's Outdoor Action Program, and we've developed a Microsoft Access database that we've been using to plan all of our food and hope that we'll be able to share some of this with you to help improve your own program. A couple of notes as we get started. We've got a lot of folks on this call, 36 right now. So if you can stay muted throughout it, and if you have any questions that arise, if you can type them into the group chat box. One of my colleagues, Rick Curtis, is going to be monitoring the group chat box, and if questions come up that need to be answered right away, he'll jump in and he'll ask them to me, and otherwise we can get to other questions at the very end. Also, if there's any difficulties, technical difficulties, if I make a mistake and think I'm showing one screen and you can't actually see it, or you stop being able to hear me, just put a note in the group chat and we'll try and address that right away. So a little bit of overview about, oh, can't see you, but can see this slide. All right, I'm getting input from the group chat that you guys can see the access screen. Some of you can see me. There's not much added by seeing me, so if you can't see me, don't worry too much. So we're gonna go back to this PowerPoint so we don't get too distracted by the spreadsheet. So a little bit of background about Princeton's Outdoor Action Program. We are primarily an outdoor orientation program. Each fall we have 75 trips out all at once during Labor Day. Each of those trips has 10 to 12 students on the trip. And so we have developed a database really to serve those needs and do a lot of bulk ordering at the start of the semester. We also have a couple of trips during our fall break and spring break, so the database works for that functionality as well, but we really geared it towards doing large scale ordering. One of the things that Access can do is really adapt to whatever your program needs are, but I just want to give you a sense of what our program has adapted for. We have, when we're thinking about planning food for trips, we think about it either as a large trip, which has 12 people, and rations for 12 people, or a small trip that has 10 people. All of our trips are 5 days, so that's something, a variable that we keep constant in how we set up this database. And we deal with a huge number of dietary restrictions. Peanut-free, gluten-free, kosher are our most common ones. And we decided to start going to using this Microsoft Access database form and moving away from using just an old Excel spreadsheet when we started to see a lot of combinations of people who were peanut-free, gluten-free, peanut-free, gluten-free, peanut-free, gluten-free, peanut-free, gluten-free, kosher, and how do you meet all of those needs in once, and became a really ridiculous spreadsheet that we were trying to manage. So to give you a sense of what we're able to accomplish, many of you may have a spreadsheet that looks an awful lot like this, that has rows and rows. I think we have 118 rows of all of the different items that we order and all of these long columns, and it's a horrible interface. It's really easy to get over here and you're trying to edit this and now you're editing peanut butter instead of Nutella, and you never really know. Oh, can't see the spreadsheet. Sorry about that. How about that? Okay, sorry team. Can we see the spreadsheet? Great. All right, we're gonna keep it on the spreadsheet for now. So you all probably have something that looks an awful lot like this spreadsheet that has rows for all of our different food items. We have 118 food items, and it goes all these columns, and by the time you're getting over here and deciding how many of whatever item this is and changing this from 10 to 11, you don't even know what item you had over here. Oh, it's pizza sauce, dehydrated. So it was just like a huge bear to handle. And so what we now have the capacity to do through using Microsoft Access is print out these really nice PDFs. So this is a PDF that says sorted by vendor. We order Cabot cheese directly from Cabot. Oh, hold on, forgot to switch the screen. There we go. How about that? Cabot cheese. So this is a list of a PDF by vendor. And we can see, okay, this is everything we need to order from Cabot. For the order I currently have in, we're ordering 3 2-pound blocks, 13 3-pound blocks, what we are getting from Costco, Harmony House, Panera, each of our vendors going down. We also have spreadsheets that are by the individual vendor. So these are just the items we're getting from Costco. These are just the items we're ordering from Cisco. And this is a list of all of the trips that we're running in. Okay, and this is a list of all of the trips that we have going out and what their menu type is. So we're able to get this really robust, really nice, easy to interface PDFs through using the Microsoft Access system. Yeah, and as I said, this is a system that we've developed to meet our needs, and some of the functions that we've built won't be necessary for your program, but I hope to, by going through and showing you how we use this and what we've developed, you'll start to get a sense of being able to think how this could help solve some of the problems that your program might have. So to go back to Access, and let's see if I remember to share properly. All right, I think I got that one correct. I'm going to assume that many of you don't have a lot of experience or any previous experience with Microsoft Access. Access is within the Microsoft Office suite. You've got Word, you've got PowerPoint, Excel, and Access is kind of like Excel on steroids. So it starts with a very basic table, which is what we're looking at here. So this looks and acts very similar to an Excel spreadsheet. We've got rows and columns. It can go on endlessly. And that may be what you're currently using. One of the other functions of Access is that we can create queries. So here's another of my tables. This lists all of the trips that OA has ever run. So last year we had only 75 trips out, but this shows all 145 trips that we've ever run. It's the trip number, so we'll call a trip H1. It's in Harriman State Park. It's trip number 1. It's a large trip. The menu is basic, and it's a currently active trip. Our next trip is H2, also in Harriman, also large. That menu's kosher, and that trip's an active trip. As we look further down, we stopped going to the Catskills, so trip number C23 for the Catskills, which used to be a large basic trip, is not one that we're running this time around. And so instead of having to just delete everything and every year added, this is all the information about the trips we're running this year, and then at the end of the year delete it, we can run a query over here, which just pulls filtered information. It starts with that initial table that looks like an Excel sheet, and a query filters only certain information. So if I only want to look at the trips that are currently active, I can open up this query, and it's now only showing me the 20 trips that I've decided are the ones we're going to run for this. And this is sort of our sample for what we're going to be using as I go through this webinar. So you see we have a nice variety of basic trips, kosher trips, gluten-free trips, all sorts of things. The next type of object that Access has is called a form. And a form is basically going to nicely format something in whatever way you want. So it usually looks nothing like a spreadsheet. I have a form that I use to keep track of all of the items of food that we have. And I think of the form as kind of like a double-sided index card that I have for each item. So I'm going to go to a more interesting one. We've got Annie's mac and cheese is one of our items here. And this has all the information about Annie's mac and cheese, the brand, what vendor we get it from, what our serving units are. And then if I go over here, it has how many boxes of mac and cheese does our basic small trip get, how many boxes of mac and cheese does a peanut-free large trip get. And so this is all of the information that I originally was showing in this massive spreadsheet. But food item, this form, makes it a lot easier to flip through that information and know that when I'm editing this field, I know I'm editing how many boxes of Annie's mac and cheese does the peanut-free small trip. So that's what the form is. It's really just a nicer interface for managing the data that lives somewhere else in your spreadsheet or in your database. And then finally, we have reports. And these are those nice PDF documents that I was showing earlier. So you're able to format things and say, highlight these lines, bold it, put a header at the top, show only this information. So a report is pulling information from one of the queries or from one of the tables. So it's pulling data from somewhere else in your database, and it's just showing these are the only parts of it that I want to see. And this is how I want it to be formatted so that I can print it out, I can put it on a label, I can hand it to my students who are packing the list or packing for the trip, whatever it is that I want to do with it. If I'm printing something, I'm going to be printing a report. Are there any big picture questions about access thus far? Any confusion about what a table, a query, a form, or a report is before I move on to showing some of our specific structure? If you have a question, you can type it in the chat box. All right, no questions so far. All right, so I'm gonna now go over how we've structured our database. And I'm gonna go back to this table called food list that I first opened up. And as I said, this is a massive list of 118 food items and all possible information about it. So we sort by food item, it's Annie's mac and cheese, it's chicken, it's chocolate chips, and then we have all the information about that item, what brand it is, what vendor we're getting it from. We track, is this item peanut free or is this item gluten free? When did we last check the allergens? So any kind of detailed information we want. Also in this is what are our serving units. So it's a 6-ounce box, but it comes in cases of 12 6-ounce boxes. So we're tracking all of this information, and then keeping track of the quantities of how many of this item does each individual trip get. So for mac and cheese, I don't know what that one is. We'll go to 2-pound blocks of Cabot cheese. Our small trips are getting three of those blocks. Our large trips are getting 4 of those blocks. Peanut-free small trips are getting 3. Peanut-free large trips are getting 4. So we kind of go all the way through it and filled out all these numbers. And as I showed previously, when we go to the form, this is just a much nicer way to be able to look at all this information rather than managing it through the spreadsheet and the table. I'm able to see it just through this form. And we have our small trips have 10 people, and our large trips come with usually have 12 people. We don't really think in this webinar. I'm not going to cover how we've come up with how much we portion per person. That's kind of actually more inherited, starting with the pre-existing menu, and then we've made tweaks as we've gone along and introduced more different dietary restrictions. So this is how we keep track of that information, rather than giving a super specific caloric plan. So then we come to our food list form, and as I said, it has basic information about each item, what brand it is, the vendor, what units it's coming in. We're keeping track of, in 2015, we cut this entirely. And when we ordered apples one year, we learned that it was $50 per bushel, but we were getting 10% off. So we just have general notes, and then we're able to see how many do we want for each type of trip, what's the volume that we're going to be sending out. So we give small trips 10 apples and large trips 12 apples because we're averaging 1 apple per person. The next thing that we take a look at is, I'm going to switch views real quick. The next thing we're calculating is how much do we currently have in our inventory. So in our equipment room, the ER, what do we currently have? One of the things that we always seem to have in stock is we always seem to have 1 or 2 50-pound bags of brown sugar. And so if we know that we have 1 50-pound bag of brown sugar, then we're probably not going to order any new brown sugar that year. But if we've thrown out our last bag of brown sugar because it got ants in it, then we're going to have a 0, and we're going to need to order a lot of it. So we're taking into account how much we currently have in inventory, And we just kind of go through this manually. I hand our equipment room staff this spreadsheet, and they update the numbers. So we make sure that that is up to date. So kind of simultaneously to running the food facing items in this database, we also are incorporating a lot of information about our trips, which I started to show earlier. So this is the list of all of the trips that we could possibly run, this table. And then I can open up just the list of our current active trips. So I've picked for this to just have 20 trips. I try to have a range of kosher, gluten-free, basic. This PFGF stands for peanut-free, gluten-free. And we have gluten-free, we have peanut-free, so we have all sorts of different combinations. And these are the trips that we're going to be ordering for. Say this is what we have going out over spring break, and this is what we want to place orders with to our vendors. Then I can go into trip menu query, which is, here it is, trip menu query. And this is a special kind of query that is calculating the sums of the totals of everything. So I'm able to calculate how many basic large trips do I have, how many gluten-free large trips do I have, how many peanut-free, gluten-free small trips do I have. And that's just calculating basically the sums from the active trips and giving me a total number. And that's going to come into some of my calculations later on. And then finally, we go into our biggest spreadsheet, the food order query, which is the part that's going to do a lot of the math. So this pulls in the information from each item of food, our hot chocolate, our Cabot cheese, and then it's calculating how many basic trips do we have, how many basic small trips do we have, what is the volume, what is the quantity each basic small trip will need, plus how many basic large trips are there, times what's the quantity that each basic large trip needs. So if I can get this formula, share. So that's just a summary of how I'm calculating. Needed basic is how the quantity per small basic trip times the number of small basic trips, plus the quantity per large trip times the number of large trips. And so this is, so this is the spreadsheet or the query where all of this math happens. We're calculating how much we need for a peanut-free trip, a kosher trip, calculating the total amount needed. We pull in from that other table how much is currently in the equipment room, calculate the total order. So it's going to say we need 5 jars of peanut butter, and then also converts it to what number. Is it 12 boxes of mac and cheese per case? How many cases do we need? What's the total cost per case? We have another field in here called excess. So it lets me know, am I buying 50 pounds of brown sugar when I really only need 1 pound? Maybe I should, or I really only need 8 pounds of brown sugar. If I'm gonna have 42 pounds left over, do I wanna rethink what I'm doing here? So this is the food order query that starts to do the math, and is the start of the complexity. And so I'll dive in a little bit deeper here and show you like how do we actually make Microsoft Access do this, and how do we do the coding behind the scenes. So I'm going to go into the design view here, which is this is the behind the scenes structure that gets food order running. And so what you can see up at the top is there's 2 boxes, one labeled food list active, and that means that it's pulling in the food list active query, that list of all of the foods that we're currently ordering. And then it's also pulling in the query of what's currently in the equipment room inventory. And it's connecting this line here means that it's connecting those 2 items, and it's saying that, if there's a row in food list active that says dehydrated pizza sauce, that matches the row in the equipment room inventory that also says dehydrated pizza sauce. And it's saying these 2 are connected. And so you should be able to, later when I tell them, put in the code to do some calculations. It knows which items to match together and what to subtract from what, even if they're not perfectly lined up. It's not based on, is this row one and this row one, it's, is this dehydrated pizza sauce and is that dehydrated pizza sauce? And so down here at the bottom half is a list of all of the fields that are going to show up in the query when I run it. So if you see it's item, needed basic, needed PF, needed GF, when we look at this query, when it actually runs, these match all the column titles. And so the needed basic is, or item is pulling in from food list active and just matching what are all those item names. Needed basic, if I zoom in and see what the calculation is, the details of this are not super important. We'll upload this database so you can see the exact coding that's used here, but it's saying, look at the quantity each basic small trip needs, and then this is a complex function that says how many total basic small trips are there, and then it adds the number of basic quantity each basic large trip needs, and how many total basic large trips are there. And then I do the same, I can look at the same coding behind the column for how much is needed for the peanut-free trips. It's pretty much identical, just 7 peanut-free. I do the same for the gluten-free trips, the kosher trips, the peanut-free, gluten-free trips. And then I calculate the total needed. All of this could be done in one field. Oh, that is slightly off. All of this could be done in one field, but I find it's easier just to not lose numbers. And this is slightly off. Usually this says total needed plus needed kosher plus all of those other fields that I just read. I don't know why I accidentally deleted that, so I'm just going to update that slightly. You can imagine that said needed basic plus needed peanut free plus needed GF plus needed kosher plus needed PFGF, but I won't make you sit here as I type all of those things in. Then we're calculating the amount we're pulling in from this table, what's currently in the inventory, calculating the total order based on how much do we need, and subtracting how much we currently have. And then the math continues as we look at the total number of cases needed, converting it from the serving units of, we send curry powder out in ounces, but we order in pounds, so we have a conversion factor there, so we know how many cases to order. Yeah, I'm gonna jump to the chat window and see. Oh, Rick has been answering questions for me. Is there another question? Yes, Rick? Rick, do you want to jump on and say that? Say what you want to say? Or, 1 second, y'all.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the query, you'll notice that there's an arrow that's pointing to the right. And what that means is that it's going to take everything that's in the box on the left, the food list query, and if there's a matching unit, connect it to what's in the ER. And so that kind of query join means that you'll always see everything that's you need to order. And if you don't have any 50-pound bags of Domino sugar in the equipment room, that won't show up. If that was basically kind of more like an equal symbol, then you would only see the two things that were matching in both sides. So that's important when you're looking at things like this to know how you want to link those two tables.
Great, thank you, Rick. Are there any other questions at this point before I move on to showing how the reports are made and how we've structured creating reports? great. So we'll move next into, we've now calculated how much food we need and of each item. But again, this is a bear of a spreadsheet. I don't really want to be going down this and, oh, I made a mistake. And I'm not going to save the changes. Okay, now it should run. Ah, what did I do? Huh. All right. Sorry about this. I'm going to hit pause real quick as I try and figure out how I just broke that.
While Caroline's working at, one of the things is Caroline created just a sort of a smaller version of this database for everybody to sort of see. So it wasn't as bulky as the one that we normally use. So this one she prepared like just for the webinar. So it hasn't been sort of thoroughly tested like the one that we use for real.
Yep. So I'm not sure what I did there to enter some zeros in the food order. I'll do a little troubleshooting later to get this solved for our ordering purposes and before I upload it, but I won't do that quite right now. So we have this massive query that calculates everything that we need to order, but we found that it's most helpful to sort our ordering based on our vendor so that we're able to send a specific sheet to our rep from Cisco and our rep from US Food saying, this is exactly what we want. So I've now created a query called food order by vendor. And this, we go into the design view. It's pretty much doing the same thing as food order, that big spreadsheet or break query we were just looking at. It's also pulling in additional information from the food list where additional information about the specific vendor lives. And then these are the list of all of the columns. Down at the bottom is a list of all the columns that are going to appear in the query. And I have it just showing things where we're ordering more than zero because I don't want it to be populated by things that, that 50-pound bag of sugar if we already have enough. And then I have this criteria to ask me which, you'll see a dialog box is going to pop up that asks which vendor. And when I input which vendor it is, it's only going to show me the things that correspond with that vendor. So as I run this, there it goes. It asks me which vendor. And I'm going to type in Wegmans, favorite local grocery store, hit enter. And now this query is just showing me the things that we are ordering from Wegmans. If I close it and open it again, it's going to ask me again which vendor. This time I'm going to type in Cisco. Boom, those are the things that we order from Cisco. I have up here a list of all of the vendors that we use. This table shows the 16 different vendors that we use, as well as information about who we contact when we've ordered from them. So I could take any of these, Vermont Smoke and Cure, I can enter into the dialog box for food order by vendor. Vermont Smoke and Cure. Oh, I guess we have enough meat stick, and we only order one item from them, so I guess we have enough in our inventory right now to cover all of our trips. So that's not showing things that are that there's nothing we need to order from. So yeah. What we're able to do with those queries that are food order by vendor is then create the reports that I was showing earlier, food order by vendor. So this, okay, Wegmans again. This is the nicely formatted, that PDF that I showed at the very start that has everything that we're ordering from Wegmans. And honestly, what we do, we print this out, we walk into our local grocery store and we hand this to the manager and say, can we have 58 cases of whole wheat tortillas and 26 cases of tomato basil tortillas and 21 cases of jalapeno cheddar tortillas. And they're like, great, I can read this. We have, it's $1.99 per case of whole wheat tortillas and $2.99 per case of tomato basil tortillas. And we have our total cost. They're able to verify that, and we're able to keep track of our expenses. And I can print this for each of those 16 vendors and very easily see what do we need to order from everyone. I also have this other report, food order all for breaks, because sometimes I don't want to, when it's a fall break and I only have 3 or 4 trips going out, I don't want to have to print 16 different sheets. I just want to see everything and be like, okay, I'm not going to call up Cabot. I can get 15 or 16 blocks of cheese from my local grocery store. So I'm not going to go through that whole shipment process. So we also have a report that shows all of the vendors at once. One of the other things that we can do, the other type of report that we do is what do we need to pack for this trip? So when we have 75 trips going out all at once, we have this huge packing operation where we line up cardboard boxes all through these big long tables in one of the dining halls. And each trip is going to get 4 boxes. We label them very creatively A, B, C, and E. I don't really know why we don't have a D, but that's how we have always labeled our food boxes. And so we're able to print content labels that say, for a kosher large trip, I want to see what are the contents that should go in box A. And so this is a list of all of the items that should go in box A for a large kosher trip. And we're able to print this out and staple it to the outside of our cardboard box. And then our students who are in charge of packing all the food just go down a list, put a container of non-bulk cinnamon into the box and check it off. And we're able to then make sure that we're not making any mistakes with our packing. We have that printed right there and know, was this item put in this box? Okay, yes, it's checked off, or no, we got to go add it back in. So we're able to print all of these labels by trip type, by box. So we can do a peanut-free small trip. Box C is going to have canned corn, it's going to have chicken, it's going to have couscous, and this is the exact quantity that should go in it. And then we also pass these packing lists out to our trip leaders. When they're handed their boxes of food, we pass out these trip printouts and say, this is everything that should be in your box. You should double check it. And so they have easy access for knowing exactly what should be in there as well. The other thing that we're able to do is another really helpful report is this one called Trips by Menu that pulls in from talks between the active trips and what their current menu is. So if I want to see, actually I guess it's this one, if I want to see a list of what are all of the gluten-free large trips that we have, because I don't know, I need to talk to, or if I want to see a list of all of the kosher trips we have, because I want to talk with the leaders about how and where they're going to get their kosher pots, I can easily sort by all of the different trip types. And maybe these guys need an extra new knife last minute. So I can look at this report and see really quickly what is the list of the groupings by different menu types. Or on this report, I can see, just go down my list of my 20 trips and what type of food menu do they have. And then sometimes the other report that you'll see over here if you start exploring our database is a list of all of the items that trip type gets. So a basic small trip, instead of it just being sorted by this is what goes in box A, this is what goes in box B. This is a report that I printed that has all of the items. So sometimes it's easier to double check based on, rather than sorting by trip or box, what is all of the food that they should have. So there's all these different types of reports that are really easy to print and format. I can quickly show the design side of this, the back end. And it basically is, it's talking to a query called contents all basic small query. So that's the input data for this report. And I've just got a header, I've got a report header, a page header, and then I say, put in each item, the quantity, the serving units. You can pull in these columns from the query, do it until you run out of items, and then it turns out this beautiful PDFable spreadsheet. I think that it pretty much everything I wanted to initially cover. So we'll jump to the chat window again for questions. Um, Rick, are there any questions from the chat window that I should answer that you haven't answered yet?
Let me, I'll just jump in because I was starting to write this to, to Justin, who asked, is the database simple enough for your student coordinators to use? And yes, most of the time, you know, with the form that Caroline developed, most of the time, the only things that the students interact with are forms and reports. They never sort of mess with the queries and the tables. And it's also possible in Access to create what's called a split database, where you put all of the tables in one database, and then you basically just have like the forms and reports and stuff in a separate database. And that's just looking at the tables. And that way, you know, students can't actually go in and mess with the tables and break them. And all they're able to do is just sort of run queries and reports and stuff. So that's another way to kind of simplify so that they don't need to look at all this stuff that they would never touch when they're using it.
Yeah, at the start of each summer when our interns are starting for orientation, I'll do a similar overview of how the database works so that they are getting a little bit of professional development and understand the broader context in which they're operating and why things are structured. But using this, they almost only go straight into food item. And there's this little arrow down at the bottom here where it says 1 out of 118, and they just click through that to go to the food item that they want to be editing. They're, all right, we're going to edit barbecue sauce. They can decide that barbecue sauce is a fruit or a breakfast item. They can just, decide it's not active. They can check allergens, but this is really the only place that they are making changes or, updating the quantities. And so this is a very user-friendly interface. And then, as Rick said, they come down to the bottom and run the reports and print out what the information that they need is. But there's not a whole lot of structural changes that we're making year to year that the students ever need to do. They might give us ideas and say, oh, it would be great if we could track such and such, and then I'm able to jump in and add that line in for them. Yeah, so Rick just asked me to say something about the drop-down boxes and lookup tables. So as I just demonstrated for meal, if I drop down, I can see our meal options, which don't really make sense, but our breakfast, lunch, dinner. This is the special, I don't know what that refers to, our fresh produce. Somebody added in fruit. I don't know who decided that, not me. Kosher specific things, Gort, drinks, or Gatorade, lemonade. So in order to have this drop-down box, I have this table over here up at the top, my raw inputs, titled meal. So this is where I'm keeping track of all of the different meals and the things that I want to show up in that field. And so if I'm afraid that somebody is going to misspell dinner and then it's not going to show up, then by having this as a dropdown, it's not up to are people typing it in properly. It's just, you just have to click. And so if I want to add a new item, I'm going to go down here and we're going to have snack time as our 12th option. And then I think I have to close this. And then if I reopen food item, snack time is now an option on this dropdown. So I've got a couple of different dropdowns incorporated here. Here's a dropdown for all of our different vendors. And again, that makes it easier, like especially Wegmans, when do you type the apostrophe or not, is that going to throw off our sorting? So just having it as a dropdown makes that really easy. And that's being fed from this table over here titled vendors that I showed earlier, that has more information about all our vendors. And if I want it, very similarly, if I want a new vendor to appear, so say we're getting something from the University Dining Services, I add that, talk to Fred Pearson, is our contact there. And then if I, platform view. I gotta close it first. I close it and open it back up. PU Dining Services is appearing there. Yeah, I think, and then box, bagels are weird. Box is also A, B, C, D, E. It's limited to those are the things that people can enter there. Rick, any other things that you think I haven't covered in this? Or any other questions people have? Oh. Do you have recipe instructions for student leaders to refer to and access? Joe, is that in terms of like how to cook the meal, or is that instructions for using access? Can you clarify that question, Joe?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I just meant, this is how you make mac and cheese, or I'm thinking of something more complicated than that. But there are definitely some of our student leaders who are not culinarily gifted. So even really basic stuff, they sometimes need recipes. I just wondered if there's an option in Access where you can put those simple recipes in for them to print out and take with their table.
Yeah, that's not something that we currently have because we type our recipe. We also have students who don't know how to make mac and cheese, which amazes me. And so we print them up in our leader manual, and that's how we send out the recipes. But there definitely would be the capacity to add that in. So a lot of the fields I've shown are pretty small, short, numerical character fields or small text boxes. But this notes field down here at the bottom, like you could type up a really long, detailed list of boil water, saute onions, switch pots, whatever it is. So you'd be able to store longer pieces of information and could definitely link, build connections where you'd have a table that has like one column is the dinner name and the next column is what the instructions are for that meal, and then link that into some of the reports and say, okay, if you're a peanut-free, gluten-free large trip, then you need to get a report that has these 6 recipes on it. Yeah, that's not something we've done, but you could absolutely pretty easily build in that functionality.
Oh, all right, thanks.
And one thing sort of jumping off of Joe's question is that obviously, a dinner is made up of multiple things. So it's quinoa, it's corn, it's whatever. And so really you're thinking about that the quinoa is one row of the table, or if you think about it as a spreadsheet. And yet that quinoa could also be used for some other meal. So, it sometimes might not make sense to tie a recipe to a particular food item because that could be used for multiple recipes. And certainly we give people stuff with a pre-planned idea about what this quinoa dinner is, but they could certainly use the quinoa in a different way and mix and match and kind of create their own stuff if they want.
Yeah. So you could have a table that lists these are our 8 the 8 recipes in rotation, and then you could make something that says print recipes 1, 3, and 7 for this type of trip, and print recipes 2, 4, and 7 for this type of trip. But yeah, you wouldn't tie it directly with the quinoa. How do you work with cheese being a lunch item and a dinner item? We teach a lot of food rationing. Man, the cheese runs out on every trip I'm on, and I don't know. I'd say more practically, we treat cheese as a for its caloric value at lunch and for its like taste value in dinner. So very few of our dinners are based on cheese being like a primary vessel, versus cheeses. We have a lot of cheese sandwiches for lunch, and then more likely for dinner, you're having couscous and veggies, and if you want to put a couple of slices of cheese on top, that's how we do it. Also, the meal drop down of this doesn't really have much functionality. It just makes it easier for sorting. I'm going to go back up to a question about other food programs like Wholesome and pros and cons to the Access or Excel route. We have not used Wholesome at all. I know it's out there, and there may be others who've explored it. We've stuck with this Access because there aren't any fees, and I have no idea what the fees associated with Wholesome are, but we felt like we were able to, from an old Excel document that we had about 5 years ago, build out this Access, and it took some work at the start to build it, and a little bit of maintenance each year, but otherwise it's pretty easily sustained. And we found that Access is much stronger than Excel, primarily because of the reports that we're able to print. And when we first started transitioning to using Access, we actually imported our old Excel spreadsheet as a table. So you can actually link a document or link a table to an existing external Excel sheet, and then we were just running these reports from that. And so even just having that basic functionality of, I'm going to use my old Excel file to do calculations, and then I'm going to use Access to print things out by vendor as well as by packing list is really valuable. And then eventually we transitioned to having it all in Access because we found this food item piece was a lot easier to manage than scrolling endlessly through spreadsheets. Say that again, Rick. Yeah. So Rick just asked me to show this report again, which is the label that we staple to the outside of a cardboard box, and we're putting all of the food in. And so again, this is one of the great functionalities that Access has over Excel. Is this goes directly on the side of the box. It's really easy to read, and we know that this group is supposed to get 3-pound bag of dried apples, 10 ounces of hummus, one 19-ounce bottle of jelly. And as we go through and place those things in the box, we can put a little check mark next to it. Are there any other questions? Amber's asking if we have any recommendations for resources regarding food handling and storage. I don't know if anyone else out there has strong recommendations on resources. We've partnered with our dining services department on campus for some of our food handling needs. And as I mentioned earlier, we pack all of our food in the dining hall, which has health inspection, has passed health inspection, and that helps us out a lot. But otherwise, we don't have any strong resources that are worth passing along.
Yeah, and I would just add that, you know, mostly what we're doing is repacking. You know, when we started moving to this system a number of years ago, we were able to purchase a lot more food in bulk rather than in just sort of standard grocery store sort of sizes, and so that cut down a lot on our package waste. And so, you know, the students who come back and do our food packing, you know, get trained in wearing gloves and head nets and stuff like that. So, you know, they go through sort of basic food handler prep in order to kind of do this work. And, you know, they keep track of things like the labels. So we keep all of the labels off the packages. So if somebody asks about an allergen or something like that, anything that we take out of its original packaging, we've got documentation. If somebody asks us, that we have in a notebook, we can sort of show people, and also show people what's kosher.
Yeah. That reminds me of another functionality here in this list of all of our trip menus by menu and size. So it's all our basic large trips, all our basic small trips, and we've had good success with sorting by gluten-free, peanut-free, kosher, and every possible combination of those. But we do have a couple of other things. So we have some halal trips. And then we also have people who are allergic to sesame, soy, and dried fruits, as one lovely individual on G9 was allergic to this past year. Allergies to legumes and special things that are outside of what we've previously defined. And so we have this, when we run this report that sorts by trip type, where we can look through this and be like, okay, this is the one, this is the peanut-free, gluten-free trip, and we have to double check that we don't have any sesame, soy, or dried fruit on that, and make sure that we're keeping track of that information. And that's all fed in the original trips table that has all the list of all the trips, their sizes, their menu type, and then we have these notes here. So we in the past, someone on PA 62 was allergic to chickpeas. Barrett Gray was allergic to a lot of things. So yeah, we're able to keep track of notes there. What kind of reusable containers do we recommend? Ziploc bags, Nalgene's. Yeah, so we do all of our spices in little baby Nalgene's, and yeah, all of our powders in little baby Nalgene's. We've tested out some other things in reusable containers, and I know we grew some interesting things when we had, I think it was either pizza sauce or salsa in a reusable container. We got some really delightful mold on that. So we're not quite where we want to be on the sustainability front. We mostly use some Ziploc bags for things that we're opening and closing many times a day. So all of our trail mixes in Ziploc bags, but a lot, we just use these plain plastic gusseted bags that we get from a plastic bag company local in New Jersey, Associated Bags, and yeah, we've been happy with them. Any other questions? I see Justin's interested in hearing food quantities by weight, or however other people do it. As I said, because all of our trips are 5 days and they're either a small trip or a large trip, we don't do as much in calculating we have this many people, we need this many calories, and that's not what our calculations are, but you definitely would have the capacity within Access to, once you define how much food weight per person you want, you could definitely have the capacity within Access to put together menus and spreadsheets. That I don't really have useful information for that. Oh.
I think one of the things is also just, this is a kind of a big investment for us. Also it's important to sort of think about the size of the trip that you're running. So for us, we have over 600 first-year students participating and about 200 leaders. So 75 trips and over 800 people. And so, trying to do this by hand, the way we used to do it, was really, really a nightmare. And so.
And very inaccurate. We would never have, 1 year we were only at 30% of the tortillas we needed. It was a mess. Amber, our policy, you asked, what do you do with food that was put out but wasn't eaten on the trip? Our policy is I think about it from the perspective of like, do I really want to eat food that's been carried around and tossed in the dirt by other people that I haven't been with? And my answer is usually like, I don't want that crummy, dirty bag of food. So our policy is that food that's gone out on trips, if it's been opened or repackaged, then it does not go back on our shelves. So a completely unopened jar of peanut butter is fine to go back on our shelves, but otherwise we send it home with either the leaders or participants. And usually they're pretty happy to have half a jar of peanut butter, whereas I would be really unhappy being given a half-eaten jar of peanut butter for a future orientation trip. If there's any other questions, we're happy to answer them. Or as I said, we're going to be posting this. Rick, I assume on Outdoor Ed is where we'll be posting this database, as well as the webinar if you want to come back and look at things. And we'll also post my email address if you have any follow-up questions and as you start to delve more deeply into it, want some more information. Otherwise, thank you all, and I hope that this has been giving you some helpful things to start thinking about for your own programs and how you might be able to apply some of these ideas to your own food ordering.